on Tuesday afternoon. I want to talk about a documentary that I watched called Farm to Table Does Not Work, and that is by Goldshaw Farms. Goldshaw Farms is a homestead in the Northeast. They do incredible work. They've really been on YouTube for quite a while. They have quite a following in that area. They also partner a lot. With Roots and Refuge in the Carolinas, and so there's a lot of partnership going on there. And so he does come from a perspective of the homesteader and kind of what that is. And so I want to talk. I watched it last night, so I kind of want to review it today and let you know what I thought of the concept of it, and kind of like what he did. I will say this: I did really enjoy the documentary. It hit a little home in some ways, and I was like, yeah, and it made me think, which I think is important. That's kind of what I look for in a documentary in the first place. Does it get me engaged? Does it get me interested? Does it help me ask questions? And so I do have questions and thoughts, and so I wanted to go ahead and bring up his premise. I'm not going to give you everything because I think you should go watch it. I think that's amazing, and so I will see if I can find it and put a link to it in the comments when I get home later tonight. So I will let you know that it will be available in the comment section of this particular video for you to watch it yourself. But it essentially started the history of the farm to table movement. So it brought all the legacy people, whether it's Chez Panisse out on the West Coast, to the East Coast chefs, and it talked about at that point it was a unique situation to have a chef or a restaurant go out and grab food that was directly from the garden and then present it to its customers. Now understand, that doesn't mean that the food movement was unique, because the food movement ultimately was happening in kitchens at home and around the country. We had victory gardens, and people were growing food, and they were growing things, and they were creating and baking and all of that, and they were sharing it. And you had, whether it was the Amish community or the tribal communities around the country and around the world, they were ultimately, and globally, there was already these markets that were happening. So in the United States, it was kind of a unique re-emergence of the farm movement, re-emergence of the food movement, and kind of talking about fruits and vegetables and what we eat and where they come from. So there was like a reassignment of that. So we started to see more of that, and it was like, okay, it's coming back. Then he talks about kind of the migration of that into the celebrity chef. The celebrity chefs, whether it's Emeril Lagasse and BAM, or you had Rachel Ray, and you had the rise of the Food Network and all of the Food Network celebrity chefs, where it almost became more of a cult of personality, and it made wanting to cook using certain ingredients important. And then you had what we call the aesthetic, which of course most everybody knows what aesthetic is now, or the ambiance of what farm to table is, which honestly he didn't say this, but I'm going to. Chip and Joanna Gaines and what happened down in at Fixer Upper kind of helped with that, because it gave a kind of a creative experience of what we were looking for, and part of that's due to just the culture in Waco. But when you start to see shiplap, you start to see a lot of the design of the kitchens and the backgrounds, and then you start to see that kind of seep into the restaurants. And then there were starting to be words and verbiage: organic, regenerative, pasture raised. It was starting to be sustainably caught, sustainably raised. Where was it located? We started to want storytelling. We not only wanted to know where our food came from, but we wanted to know who was it that was growing it. Now, understand, at the same time, I was also in the wine industry. So for me, the big thing was that storytelling. Why? Because if you knew where your wine came from, you got to know your winemaker, then you ended up having a relationship with that place. So you would be there and you'd do interesting things and have a good time, and you like create an amazing experience. So that was very cool. But if you didn't do that, then that was something that was like, you didn't have that relationship. So it became a big deal as far as what relationship was like. So ultimately, I looked at that and said, okay, so now what is it that we need to do? So we started doing that in the food world. So like, get to know your farmer. Where does your pig go? How did your pig live? How was it raised? What was it fed? Where did it walk? And all the things, to a point where we almost idolized the pig and idolized the farmer. And so it became a lot of work for restaurants to, one, know the provenance of every animal, and also to look at it and go, okay, is this an animal that we can bring in? And then what is the cost associated with this particular pig, they're raised the way they are and fed the way they are and slaughtered the way they are, and where do we buy it from? Because, the big thing is you don't want to buy it from corporate farms. Well, corporate farms are less expensive. And so a small niche farmer or a small homesteader is going to pay more. They're going to pay more in input costs, pay more in taking care of the animal, pay more in the processing costs and all the things that go with it. So if that doesn't happen, or if that becomes an issue, then what happens is there's not an opportunity for you to make as much money. So you're like, what do you do? Well, there was a rise in the farm to table movement in the 90s and 2000s. So ultimately, when that happened, people were like, everybody was becoming farm to table. You go to a cocktail place and they'd have it in a mason jar. They make sure that they could tell you that this syrup was made here. It was using all organic fruits and vegetables. Or you go the rise of farmers markets. You'd have like 4,000 farmers markets. Then you have like 25,000 farmers markets. So there's farmers markets rising up from everywhere. Farmers were growing everything. Everybody was scaling up, and there was like this idea that it would never end. There's like, oh, it's just gonna keep going. We've turned the corner. We're gonna do better, and we just kept going and going and going. Ultimately, is that the way that it actually happened? You have to watch the video and find out. We do know that it kept going for a while, and everybody kept really ramping up and getting into it. We did start to see a couple of changes. One, there was some fraud involved, and that is that people started to say that they were organic, or say that they were local, or say that they were bought it from some farmer, and it was being traced back, and they were not, in fact, doing that. Or they were saying they were buying fish and they lived in like Idaho. Well, you weren't getting it flown in that night, so ultimately it was not fresh caught fish. So there were some things like that where it's like, you could tell there were some issues with it. Well, then we started to, again, we ramp up, and then about what? I would say 2020, we had a major shift. Why? Because all of a sudden all these restaurants shut down due to the pandemic. When they shut down due to the pandemic, a crazy thing happened though. People started eating at home. So they started to go to farmers markets, buy the food, and cook at home. So then they were like, why am I going to go to a restaurant, pay $150 for a steak when I can go buy a steak directly from the farmer and make it myself? So that actually ramped up and they did well. But at the same time, the scale was still an issue, meaning they could scale up to a certain extent, but they were families. They were families doing things. They were family homesteaders. So ultimately, it was them by themselves. It was them, with their families, their husbands, their wives, their kids. And so they would ramp up. They'd buy these hoop houses. They'd put all this energy into it. They'd make this lettuce. Then they'd have it all available, and then an account would just go away. Or so they couldn't charge the amount they needed to make money on it. So then what happened was they got burned out. So I did watch farmers. I watched really close farmers of mine, and I watched them have great products. Like I bought from them on a weekly basis. I was like, yes, absolutely, I love this. And then they would just not be there the next time. They'd be gone, and I'd be like, well, that didn't help me a whole lot. And then ultimately, I've watched friends that, they went, they built it out, they shared, they did class and all that. Then they brought it all back in and said, well, it's not worth it for me to do it for everybody else. So I'll just do it for my family. And then it does not disrupt the food system at that point. At that point, you're just essentially throwing the food system saying you can have it, and we're going to work on what we can do at home and do what we can for our own. And we'll just good luck to the rest of you. Which I also see as well. There is that's a little bit disingenuous. I'll be honest with you. I'm being a little bit snarky. I shouldn't be, because that takes a lot. It takes a lot to do it, what homesteaders do. And you don't know what people are dealing with on a regular basis, really. Like I said, it's a lot. There's a lot happening at home, and you should let that be. But ultimately, how do we get it to a point where we want to change that farm system? We want to change the corporate farms. We want to have better food, but we need to have it at a scale that people can afford it and people can eat, and we have the sheer amount of people to feed. And so I think that's the hard part. And I think we still haven't figured that out. I think we're getting there. I think we're building little quilts of a bunch of patches of small farms that is interesting. I think co-ops are becoming more interesting. I think we need to look at the co-op model in that what does it look like where co-ops all over the place where they're different, and you might have a person that runs it and then other people supply it, or CSAs where you have multiple farms together, so that one farm doesn't do as well in one year, they can then put things in. I saw that happening towards the end of the last couple of years, which I think is really smart. I also think that it is really, really interesting as we're seeing corporate farms or large scale farms starting to really talk about regenerative ag. Why? Because I think a lot of farmers don't realize that they can make more money being regenerative farmers than they can traditional farmers. Now, they think it's weird for stuff, and it's like, what is happening? Why would I do that? Well, the reality is, if you can get enough grassland that you don't have to buy hay and you don't have to buy a lot of chemicals, and you can let them rotate on a regular basis, and you can harvest a lot more cattle, that is going to be a big bucks for you, because if you don't know it, beef prices are really good right now. So ultimately, it's fantastic. So if you had more cattle, because you have more hay and more, and didn't have to put as many chemicals into it, you're not buying more fertilizer. You're not buying more, weed killer. You're not buying all these other things. You're just letting the earth do what the earth does, and then you're having better soil. It's helping with erosion. It's helping with, microbes in the soil and all the things that you need. Meanwhile, you're getting a healthier product, healthier beef, and it's grass fed, grass finished, and you get a premium on it. I'm like, it's kind of a weird business practice that didn't like take off as much as it should have. But it takes, generations of farmers have done it the same way, and their dad did it, their granddad did it, and their great granddad did it. So I'm from Oklahoma, I get it. But at the same time, we have to look at the practices and what can make you more money to keep you profitable and keep the farm open, because we're losing too many farmers. At the same now, what else can we do though? That was the question that kind of came up to me. It was, okay, what else can we do besides what he stated? And the future for him was about regenerative ag. It was about kind of like what the new food system will look like. And it's affordability, it's making it approachable for everyone, it's making sure, how do we do that? And I think that is a question that I don't know the answer to, but I want to put it out there. So if you're looking at fresh fruits and vegetables, yes, needs to happen. How do we do it? I know that schools need fresh fruits and vegetables. Can the federal government do something positive? Invest in local farmers who then can put the food in schools within a 30-mile radius of their farm, so that we can make sure that farmers have a market and that it goes directly to kids that need the food. And ultimately, it has this wonderful cyclical economy in a local area that I think would be fantastic. I think that's number one. I also think that if we look at marketing, and we need to be a little more stringent on what that is, as far as, be careful, anything that's out there, organic, whatever, they're starting to muddy it up. It's not, the origin labels are messy, where stuff is located, where it's made. In the wine world, it was, whether it was vented in a space, whether it was grown and bottled in a space, or whether where was it made? Was it an American blend, or was it a local Oklahoma blend? And you had to have labels, and there's laws and regulations and all that. So we have to get really specific about our food, because ultimately people are like, they just see a label and go with it. Also, price fluctuations, that happens. The economy goes up, the economy goes down. So what do you do when the economy goes down? How do you change your model? How do you change the restaurant model? What does it look like? How do you build those relationships between farmers and restaurateurs and new people that want to do new food systems, food groceries, and all of that? And how can we make that happen? Don't forget food deserts. Food deserts are places where within, I believe, a mile, they don't have a grocery store, like a mile radius. And in urban environments, that's unique. In rural environments, it's not necessarily, but you will see not access to fresh fruit and vegetables, or access to a grocery store within a mile. Those are called food deserts. There are several of them in the state of Oklahoma. There's a lot of them around the country. There are people that are working very hard, whether it is CSAs, whether it is urban gardens or things like that, to really create these systems that help feed people and bring people together in community. So I think that again is an important part of this whole situation, which is I want to make sure that we are bringing people together. We're talking about food. We're talking about where it comes from. We're educating ourselves. We're celebrating those that are doing it well, and we are calling out those that aren't. At the same time, I really want to commend anybody who goes into homesteading or farming. Let me just say that right now. I maybe will be critique some things, but let me be clear. I'm not. I'm talking about farming. So the farmers that are doing that, you guys, biggest belt buckle ever. Like seriously, you are amazing to do what you do, to ranch, to farm, to create the food that we need to feed everyone in the country and in the world globally. That is amazing. That there is nothing like that as far as the amount of food that you're producing on a massive scale. My hope is just that we can all work together to create a better food product, a more nutrient dense food product that is better for everybody involved, that makes you more money. Because again, I want you to survive. I want you to be able to pass that farm down to your kids and grandkids. I want you to be able to look back and be like, yes, it is better when I left it than when I got it. Because I think that's what every farmer wants, is to be able to pass that down to their children or grandchildren, and to make the land that they have worked so hard and stewarded and taken care of and celebrated and honored better off than when they got it. And I think that that is a possible thing that we can do. So I know this is a long-winded thing, and I mix my stuff with his stuff, but I will encourage you to please go watch this documentary. It's called Farm to Table Does Not Work. And he'll give you more information, be more specific in dates and people and all that. So I hope that you've enjoyed this. It is my throat is a little scratchy. Sorry about that. I'm getting over a little bit of a cold. I will have another Car Chat podcast on Thursday around 4 o'clock, same time. So I can't wait to see you guys then. And I hope that you have a great, great day.